Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode. I have guests and I have special guests, and today is somebody super special. And I'll tell you the reason behind it. And I'm sure if you go through this ordeal for the next like half an hour or so, you'll even understand, right? That why is this guy Shvatang blabbering so much, but not Jeremiah? So, Jeremiah, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time coming and talking to all of us because you're somebody I've been following for a while. Your style of writing is very single sentence, a two sentence there, just right there. I think you tweet more on LinkedIn, but it's so just in banging kind of a thing, not those lengthy ones. But I connect with it. I make sense, and we're all part of the same e-commerce Shopify community. He's done a lot that I have realized, and we'll go all peek into it, guys. But let me start by saying thank you again, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's I know we've chatted before, and it's always a pleasure. So thanks for having me on.
Perfect, thank you. So let's start, right? I would definitely not be able to do justice to tell others about you and what you've done in the background. So I'd love for you to, take a moment to tell us about your background, why, what, and
hmm
how here, please.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I currently run a survey platform for e-commerce businesses called KnoCommerce. We have about 2,500 merchants we work with. All all the way from brands just getting started to brands that are doing hundreds of millions a year in revenue. So lots of different types of businesses. As of what is it, June 2023, we have about 6.5 million survey or questions being answered every month on our platform. So a lot of data coming in. Most of the time, we're tying it back to revenue. So that's what I do currently. I was co-founder, CEO, um, and so and we sold to a company called WeCommerce, which is now Tiny, last year, and so that was so I now work for Tiny. So I'm still CEO, still operate very independently, but it's a slightly different context now than being an independent startup for sure. So that's the way it functions currently. But I've been in the space for uh, over 10 years now in some capacity or another. I got started building WooCommerce extensions, and then had my own brand for a little bit. Did the agency thing for a bit, and then I've been building tech since 2020 for the Shopify ecosystem. So yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Quite a journey, and I think it all culminates into building something to solve a particular problem. And
hmm
and I will have to go and rewind this to actually make a gasp of the numbers. What you just said, the mind-boggling numbers, huge amount of data collected, working with top brands to actually deliver value, and which is really hard. So congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you've been doing this for about 10 years now, right?
Mhm.
And you said that you've had those multiple gigs around different things. So I'd like to take a peek a little bit into that because that's, I think, a very important building blocks of why you would have started no commerce and why you
Yep.
came about doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my first start. So there's been a few different iterations. So the first thing I did was building was essentially open source software. So that was really how I got my start. So it went from open source software to trying to build my own brand, and then into the agency world a little bit, and then back into tech. And so those are all very different things, obviously. And I think there's a few sort of lessons that I've learned along the way in there. What in open source software, the beauty of it is that uh, it's free. Like at its core, it's a free product, and I don't know how much experience you have in open source, but there's okay, yeah, but it's awesome because somebody can go, they can install something, they can play with it, they can test it, and there's no risk to them, essentially, in
Sure.
order to do that. And so
Yeah.
that was really what we built. Was it was an extension. Initially, it was called Menu Cart, and so the core of it was that it added a shopping cart to the menu of your website, and that was it. And there was a lot more complication to it. Supported tons of different languages, lots of different styles, lots of things you could do with it. But we ended up having, I think today it's still active and available. I think it's over 100,000 stores that use it currently.
Wow.
Um, and we ended up building additional products as well beyond that one. But yeah, it just goes to show you the expanse of
Yeah, the
open source
scale. Yeah.
software. Yeah, so it's like, so that's the cool thing about it, is like the distribution ability is massive because there's no risk for somebody to use it.
Right.
Uh, the downside though is that it's really hard to make money in the ecosystem, and I think
Yeah. True.
yeah, what you find is that it really makes innovation tricky. So what happens is you build something at the outset, and then your in order to generate revenue, you need to keep building. You need to keep creating things,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of the way it works. And so when you have a very low cost product, it means you don't have much revenue to fund innovation, and
Hmm.
it means that you are spending a lot of your time just working on maintenance, essentially,
Right.
and support. And so and there's nothing wrong with that, to be clear. I think that's it's great, but it does kind of go to show why open source oftentimes falls behind the larger players in a market. So looking at Shopify, for instance, versus WooCommerce, the
Yeah.
financial incentives just weren't there for WooCommerce to ever be able to build to the same level that Shopify did. And so there
Right.
was a time, 2012 to 2015 ish, maybe even a little bit later than that, 2017, where WooCommerce was the leader.
Yeah.
And it was because distribution was easy, it was low risk for people to get involved, but there was just never an economic model that supported WooCommerce growing to the same level that Shopify did. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's the reason why Shopify came out ahead, in my opinion. So um, that was one of the big lessons that I learned early on, was just this idea that you do, as much as I want to give things away for free, as and still do sometimes, for sure. If you actually want to build something meaningful, you do have to generate revenue in a meaningful capacity and on an ongoing basis.
And I think you very rightly pointed that out. I think that that commercialization model, all that backbone where you support that entire ecosystem in that way, I think is more and more relevant in today's time because I also know the WooCommerce CEO Adi is a really nice guy. I've chatted a
Yeah,
few times as well, and very very sharp. So I kind of understood where he's coming from and the innovation and things they do, and it's a cool platform as well. But Shopify kind of taken in a very different way altogether. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. So uh, I the whole open source part, the agency part, I kind of understand the agency part a little bit now because I talk to a lot of them. We work with a few of them as well, and we try to penetrate through them. So like you help us work together, etc. As a tech partner. But what was that dawning moment, or what was the whole eureka moment? Then you decided that, hey, you know what? No, I have to do something else. Let's go and build a tech stack and take it to the amazing level that you have.
yeah. So my during the time that I was doing the WooCommerce extensions, I got to know this guy, Pearson Crass is his name. And Pearson has become a good friend over the years. This is probably 2013. When Pearson started his agency in 2018, Lunar Solar Group, I helped him out for a year on that. And that was that and another agency experience were kind of my experiences in the agency world. But the goal had always been for us to actually build a tech company together. And so the timing wasn't right. That was 2018, 19. And so I ended up going to work for a SaaS company for a little bit.
Hmm.
And then in 2020, the pandemic hit and everybody was trying to go online. Things changed. It's definitely yeah, it was a different time for sure. And so Pearson called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm ready. Like, let's build this tech company." And so that was really the origination of it. So Pearson and his agency funded everything. So he's the co-founder. And so now that we've sold to Tiny, Pearson's not technically a part of it. But I mean, obviously, like anytime you create something, you're always interested in its
Of
success.
course. Yeah.
So yeah, Pearson and I were the co-founders, and so we built this thing out, and it initially, so the goal was customer insights, and surveys is one uh, vehicle in order to collect customer insights, and the one that we felt needed the most work at the time. There was not a lot in the way of good customer survey tools for e-commerce brands. It's actually gotten better, which is good. I think we've been kind of leading the charge in that space. So that's a fun thing to see. I think when we look at what's out there, um, we weren't the first, so I'm not going to take credit for that. But I think we definitely pushed the envelope to a new level that hadn't been seen before in our industry, and we're seeing a lot of other companies following suit, and that's really fun. So yeah, and again, we're not to say that we're the only ones doing that. There's other I don't want to just
Yeah.
presume that we're the only people that have anything innovative, because that's definitely not true. But it's fun to be part of something where you're actually pushing things forward. So that was surveys was kind of the start of it. They actually had an internal survey tool that they were using, so we launched that as a very initial uh, kind of an early learnings app. So we called it our pilot app, and we had a few things that we were trying to learn with that. So I worked in the WooCommerce space, but not in Shopify. So one, we wanted to better understand the Shopify ecosystem. Two, needed to better understand basically value. What was this worth to merchants? Um, and then three was kind of just understanding what are the missing things that people need that we don't offer now. And so with while we launched that, we then started building the full platform on the side. And so that platform is what we call KnoCommerce. It's our main platform. We launched it publicly in September 2021, so it's been 18 months, a little over 18 months, I guess. And yeah, have over 2,000 brands, 2,500 ish that are on there now. So it
How?
it's grown pretty fast. Yeah.
How? Sorry. Yeah, how the heck is that possible? That's
Yeah.
insane rocketing growth. Because and sorry, but I'd just like to add a little bit of context. Is
Mhm.
we started focusing on Shopify about like say 4 months, 5 months back now, and it's a crowded space. There are so many players.
So
Customer acquisition is very expensive and very inefficient, to say the least.
mhm.
But the kind of number that you're talking about, Jeremiah, is insane.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it snowballs. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. So when we launched in September 2021, we probably had, it was like 30 to 60 merchants. I don't remember the number. So in beta, that was about the number that we had. We weren't going to launch in September. We were going to do it in October, but for ease of install, we'd enabled it on the Shopify store, or sorry, on the Shopify app store. So we weren't trying to get installs, but it was kind of there. And then Shopify actually featured our app, and so I don't know how much impact that had. I will say it didn't seem to have an impact really in terms of like new users. I think we maybe got 10 active new users out of it. But we did have some installs that week. So I think we probably had 100 installs in September of that month. And then most of our strategy has been focused on partnerships. And so agencies, tech partners, things like that. And so from there, I don't know. Early on, we were getting maybe um, 50 new installs, 30, let's call it 30 to 70 a month.
Hmm.
For the first few months, I think we had Yeah, it started this year. I think we had about 1,200, 1,400 maybe. I might be wrong on those numbers, but we've almost doubled since the beginning of this year. So just to kind of give you some context, like it snowballs, right? So you have 50, 50, 50, and then now you go to 100 a month, and then it's 150 a month, and then it just word of mouth has an impact. So I think the one thing that I try to tell people is that time matters, and they're just kind of doing the same thing over and over. So the number of merchants we add in a month now is very different than it was 18 months ago.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it just takes some time.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then I usually sleep late. I get like very few hours every night, and hearing you, I don't think I'm gonna get any tonight. Because no, this is to say the least very inspiring, Nirmani, because uh, I've checked out your app. I know how it is. Very very simple to use. Kind of very clear on in terms of messaging and the value, what it is. Yeah. So and early guys like us, we can only just learn from it. Um, Before I move on, there's something I'd like to just understand from you. That given you've been in this ecosystem for about 18 months now, there is a report I read like 2 days back that last week there were more than 84 different Shopify apps released on the store
Mm-hmm.
in a week, right?
Yep,
So I think this number has drastically gone high as well in the past couple of years. So
it
one
has.
is yeah, one is this getting tougher and tougher. But what's your take here? Is the market also getting bigger, or it's getting more competitive, or how do you see this whole Shopify space evolving from a app perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the I don't see it doesn't look like Shopify has it listed anymore, but they used to list the total number of apps. So I think when I I think the last number I saw was over 10,000 apps. And the a couple of years ago it was 7,000. So that's call it a 50% increase in the number of apps in the Shopify ecosystem. The total e-commerce, what I would look at is actually the e-commerce buying, the dollars spent in e-commerce.
Mm.
So like that has not increased by 50%, because at the end of the day, even if more merchants are being added to the Shopify ecosystem, if they're all small merchants who can't afford to pay for apps, it doesn't help
Yeah,
any of the app developers.
yeah,
And so the what you're really looking for is how big is the total market of people actually buying products online, and it hasn't increased by 50% for sure. If you just look at it in that context, I think that goes to show that there's more competition now than there used to be. The app store is interesting to me, and just the Shopify ecosystem, because you have some of the types of apps. So like what we built back in the day with WP Overnight was the name of our business, was a bunch of very simple apps that were a few dollars a month.
mm,
And we charged annually, $25 a year, but that would kind of be the equivalent of like the Shopify ecosystem, where you have an app that's say $7 a month or $10 a month,
mm,
and it's relatively low risk for a merchant to go install it. There's no extra usage fees, anything like that. But
yeah,
those kinds of apps, you kind of are reliant on the app store, because you don't drive a high enough revenue per customer to go find customers outside of the app store. So like let's say your annual contract value, as they call it,
well, yeah,
for an app that does $10 a month in revenue, that means you're doing $120 a year in
mm-hmm.
sales. It's probably going to cost you more than $120 in marketing,
To
time,
acquire, yeah,
ads, all of that, to go find that person outside the Shopify ecosystem. So you're very reliant on app store search, maybe some app store ads if you can do that effectively. It sounds like you've done app store ads. Has that uh is that correct?
yeah. We tried a few, just to test the keywords and just to understand how they work, etc. Uh, and I would admit this that we had one install for $200,
Okay.
and the guy uninstalled as
Yep.
well. And the
Yeah.
same day, I read another post by somebody else in the US. It said I paid $850 for an install. and the
Yeah.
guy installed. Like that hurt
Right.
really bad.
So, and that's kind of what we see too. I don't remember our cost to install, but we have some key. We do pay some in App Store ads, but um, it's just not like it's if you don't have a high average revenue per customer, even
Mm.
App Store ads are hard. And so, when you're a low revenue app, really you have to you're very reliant on organic search, maybe people writing blog posts, somebody telling their friends, but there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of paying to acquire customers. You can't force growth. There's nothing you can reasonably do to force your app to grow. So if you are at 100 users and you want to get to 1,000, there's no economic reality in which you can actually force that growth from 100 to
Yeah.
1,000 if you're a low cost app. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum are companies like, and actually Klaviyo is not a great example because I have no idea what their marketing is like, but I'll just use them as an example. So they are, part of the Shopify ecosystem, and they have customers who are paying them $50,000 a month. And
Yeah,
so in a context like that, it's
it's a very different ballgame.
it's
Yeah,
very different. Yeah,
yeah,
you can hire somebody, and you can tell them you can pay them $100,000 a year, and you can say your job is to go find 5 customers that'll pay us
absolutely.
50,000 a month.
Yeah,
And that if all you do this year is get those 5 customers, we're happy. And so that's a
yeah, one.
totally different context. And so I think that's one thing that I missed early on in is understanding that the app store, when it is more competitive, unless you have a product or an app that's just a no-brainer for somebody, or something that's kind of a hot app. So like a good example of this is post-purchase upsells. So Shopify added post-purchase, basically better APIs for post-purchase upsells last year.
Yeah, yeah,
And so if you were building an app in that space, you can get a lot of traction really quickly if you are doing a good job, because everybody's looking to add an app that does that. The problem is you get to a certain point where everybody's already added those apps and you can't grow anymore. And not that you can't grow at all, but you're now competing with
it's very
all the other.
burden. Yeah,
Yeah, it becomes
yeah,
really competitive. And uh, if if your revenue per customer isn't high enough, you can't actually go do marketing and all those other things to help try to get more apps. So or more customers. So I think that's uh, I don't know what the lesson is here necessarily, except
lots. Ask me, ask me.
okay. But I guess my main point is that you need to think about the economics of what you're charging, and
Yeah,
what that means for your business in terms of your ability to grow it and scale it. And if you have a job let's say you work as a software engineer somewhere, and you have a lot of free time, and all you're trying to do is make $5,000 or $10,000 a month on the side, then
yeah,
just build a simple app, simple pricing, put it on the app store, let it do its thing. But if you're trying to build a business off of it, you have to think about the revenue strategy with a lot more intentionality.
yeah. And at the end of it, right, what we try and preach every e-commerce brand is, you guys look at CAC to LTV. CAC to LTV is the same logic that goes for us in our business as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yep,
okay.
it's exactly the same.
So I think there was a lot of insights on uh, launching, understanding the market, how to try and figure it out. And I loved what you said that you can't force growth. I think
Yep.
that's a gold nugget that I'm going to get out of it as well. But tell me this, that I think there needs to be again like a switch that kind of flips in your head and it says, hey, you know what? I've launched something. I
Mm.
have so called found my product market fit. I have done my 0 to 1 journey.
Hmm.
And now my matrix are completely different because now I'm in the 1 to 10 journey. For
Yep.
me, now priorities change. So,
Yep.
what were your priorities after, say, 6 months of launch, and how do you measure that even today?
Yeah, it's a good question. The a lot of the shift in, so there's been kind of a couple of different shifts in priorities. One is obviously business priorities, and then two, also personal priorities have had to shift. So as founder, early on, 0 to 1, it was all I did all the demos, I did all the customer support, all of those kinds of things went through me. And so that isn't sustainable. So
Yeah.
that works at 100 merchants. It doesn't work at 2,000 merchants. And
Yeah.
so that's been a big shift. And I think the organization honestly mirrors that to a large extent. And so I think a lot of what we've done is the if the 0 to 1 was me and my capabilities of getting things done, the 1 to 10 is a lot of where are the things that I am still the person doing them, and how do we get somebody else doing those things.
Right.
And and so sometimes that doesn't make sense. And so there's definitely a lot of things that I do where it's one of those things where we just don't have it's either a small enough part of my job that it doesn't matter and it's not worth hiring somebody else, or it's actually a good example is I still lead most of our product efforts. So in terms of what we build, I'm the decision maker on most of those things. And so
Mhm.
um, I give our team as much freedom and flexibility in terms of the actual implementation as possible, but the feature work is very much guided by myself. So at some point in our business that will change, but that's been kind of the last thing where I that's my strong suit and skill set, and so I kind of focus on that, and then things like sales and marketing and customer support was actually like one of the later functions also that I had somebody else take over. But
Yeah.
those functions now have somebody else running them, and I am not responsible for those things on a daily basis. And that's been kind of fun, actually. People will reach
Okay.
out to me and say, "Hey, can you do this thing?
Yeah.
Like, we want to sponsor a podcast, or we want to do this." And I say, "Oh, that's not my job. I don't know."
Yeah. Okay.
And I really don't. I really empower our team as much as possible to make
Right.
the decisions. And so there are literally things where I'll send them to somebody on my team and say like, "This is up to you. I don't even want to know.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
get it
Do
done."
whatever. Yeah. And I think that's true, right? The team empowers you to go and deliver because there are just I think just so many things just comes along, right? It's difficult to execute, and especially at the scales that you guys are operating now.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, and
um,
it's a process. It's not like we're at least a year away from the point where I feel like I have somebody responsible for all of the major functions of the business.
yeah,
Um, so I still am very much in the weeds, still jumping on customer calls, still doing all those things. But I try to make it so I'm not the one ultimately responsible for those things.
sure,
It's I'm basically reporting to whoever my manager is, and of those things in that
yeah.
context.
And at the end, you can't let it go because you enjoy it, right? So
Yeah,
let's
that's
be
it
honest there.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I have spoken to a lot of brands in the past month, and one of the standard complaint that a lot of them are making is uh, they are seeing decline in traffic, and of course the cost going up, and decline in conversions post COVID,
Yep.
right? How do you think the market holds in the next 2 to 5 years? Because I know the big agencies have kind of reduced the growth rate of e-commerce by a few CAGRs, and that's all whatever numbers. But what do you see working with such huge brand? Because especially with customer insights.
Yeah, the I personally think that we're probably going to be in a period of recession for a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, and that's a I feel like that's a scary word. I don't necessarily mean it in a scary way, but
Sure.
recession just means it's not as strong as it was 2 years ago. And so when you talk
Yeah.
about online commerce, I think that I don't necessarily think that means less dollars going into e-commerce, but I do think it means that you're not going to see growth rates like what we've seen. Um,
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I would say is that from my vantage point, what I'm seeing is a lot of uh, kind of an adjustment or a realignment of things in terms of the economics of things. So the in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of money put into e-commerce brands. So investors started throwing money at e-commerce.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what you had was a lot of brands who had an interesting product, really, and let's just call it an interesting product. But there's for some reason they received investment, and so they go out and they start spending money to grow sales to in paid ads specifically. They started spending a lot of money. So you had a lot of subsidized advertising happening essentially that was backed by VC monies, low interest rates, all of that. And so I think that drove up ad costs. And it allowed for more competition in the e-commerce space. And so I think that that is going to start to just shift down a little bit. What I see is a lot of brands that do 1 to 5 million a year in revenue struggling right now, and I think a lot of them are going to be fine. Just to be clear, and I don't want it
Mhm.
to for
No,
brands
no,
that are doing that. This is not
yeah,
like a doom and gloom sort of thing, but I think there's a lot that like that's a really hard point to get past, and I think because money was easy to access over the last few years, there was overspending happening in that category. Um, and so I think that what I'm seeing is a lot of those brands changing the way that they do business to try to get profitable. Some of them are going out of business, unfortunately. But there's definitely a change there. And so like kind of a readjustment, realignment. Um, what's been really interesting though is looking at brands that do 50 million a year plus in revenue. They seem to be doing great. And so I think that's one of the big learnings I have too is it almost feels like the online spending is going to be consolidated a little bit into a smaller number of brands. And so you start to see some of these brands that they did find a really good growth rates over the last few years. They've done really well. They've gotten to new levels where they have better um, economies of scale and they have, better infrastructure and systems in place. And so they can spend at a higher level and actually afford it and are growing their customer bases. And they just the easiest way to say this is they know their numbers. They know what works, what doesn't work, and they
yeah,
can spend more confidently because they know all those things. And so I think we'll probably see a shift to a little bit really high quality brands continue to grow really well and do really well. And I think it's going to be a little bit harder for smaller brands and new brands to the market, honestly.
yeah,
Um,
and I also think that there's going to be some kind of consolidation as well.
yep,
The cash rich ones will buy the smaller ones and move
for
forward.
sure.
So
Yep.
yeah,
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 I mean, imagine. I'll just use that as an example. I know the guy who runs Ridge Wallets, and I know he's always talking about buying companies and doing this and that. And so I could see somebody like that finding a company that does 5 million a year in sales, and if Ridge, I don't know what Ridge's numbers are, but let's say it's 100 million a year.
yeah,
It's not that big of a deal for them to buy a company doing 5 million a year
right,
in sales, and then they push it out to their network of customers, and maybe that becomes a $20 million product line for them. So
yeah,
it just
win-win. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's a win-win exactly. So I think there will be a lot more of that too.
exciting. So yes, there is some parts which are not that great, and there is that whole reset economy in the other words. But
Mm.
there are other parts. The bigger ones are doing very well, and they're gonna take the market forwards, which is good.
Yeah.
Um, So let's ask a reset question here,
Okay.
Jeremiah. And um, in case you had to start a new Shopify app today,
Mm.
okay, given the whole new tech, right, the speed of the entire cloud and hosting, etc., Shopify adding new features, letting go more APIs.
Yep.
There's the whole OpenAI stack, generative AI, the whole machine learning and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, are there some like two or five examples or where you would say that if you had to start something you would kind of focus on these areas of the whole ecosystem?
I mean, you mentioned one that the AI revolution that's happening right now. I think that's one that would be really interesting to look at. So that's one. In the context of Shopify specifically, the new checkout APIs that they launched in the last few months, or at least made widely accessible in the last few months, are really interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, the so at the end of the day, so those are the two I would be most interested in and focus
Fair.
on for sure. Um, at the end of the day, you're always going to it's about driving value for merchants, and so if you can save somebody a lot of time or money, but I mean they're very in the context of a business like this, with the same thing in a
Yeah,
large regard. So
yeah.
if you can save time or money, that's going to be huge. And then in the context of checkout, if you can prove that you can drive more revenue, increase conversion rates, those kinds of things, that's always going to be really, really valuable. And so I think some of the capabilities that have been added and there are really, really cool. And I think I'm seeing some people, Gil, I think his name is from,
New York.
yeah, yep, from New
Yeah,
York.
I look at some
Got
of his stuff
blocks.
he does as well. Yeah, blocks. Yeah, yeah.
So like that's a really, really cool app. I really like what he's doing with that, and those are the kinds of things I would be focused on if I was if I had to do something totally different. I to be clear, I love what I do. I think it's really valuable, but I think the downside is that sometimes it can come off as it, it's almost cyclical. So sometimes it's really, really valuable for a merchant, and sometimes it's not. And there that can change. So somebody can come to us and say, I need to know the answer to this thing. And then they learn it, they go, they do something about it, and then they don't need to know the answer anymore. And so that's the downside to what we do. I would love to have um, something that was always valuable. And we've done a lot, and we'll continue to do a lot on that context within our application. But uh, it's just easier in the context of, say, a checkout experience where everything you're doing is focused on conversion and driving revenue.
No, don't say conversion because I don't think it's such an easy sell, right? We're trying to do conversion optimization,
True,
right?
that's true. Yep.
And it's funny when we go and talk to merchant, then like, are you getting an average 3%? They're like 2.5%. Are you happy? Of course, no. Do you like what we do? Yes. So is it an urgency for you? No, we're still doing this, we're still doing
Yeah.
that. And like, even if you're not happy and you're looking for something and you could find something that's still, status quo and it just takes
Yeah.
time. So,
That
yeah,
is true. Anything new feels risky. There's always that component too.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I've heard this so many times now,
Yeah.
and I know, but I also know that everything which is doing well today was new sometime, right? So, but yeah,
Yep.
I think it's just the process, and it's the journey. So that's good. It's been really nice. I think we got a lot of stuff, and I wanted to get a lot of uh, like insights from you on the whole Shopify app side of things, how to build a product, what to focus on, and steps. So that has been pretty, valuable for me, and I'm sure for the others as well. The last thing that I'm going to ask you here, Jemma, is what I try to do is be a little cheeky before we end the podcast. Is you have to share something with us that you've never told anybody.
Ooh. Mm. Something I've never told
Can be a
anybody.
funny story, can be something about you, or anything which is interesting.
Yeah. Shoot. I have to think about this for a second. Um I don't even know. In
Okay.
my I'm trying to think of a good example. I just told a story the other day that was
Yeah, yeah.
interesting. So I don't want to use that one. Let's see. What else do I have?
Like the last guy I spoke to, he mentioned that when they started the company we were talking about, he said it wasn't an agency, it was completely something else, and then the story led to something else, right?
Yep.
Somebody else I spoke to told me about the horrible guitar that he intends to play sometime or the other. So just something like that, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. Trying to think. This would be
Just to let you know, I did want to put you on the spot. Yeah.
yes. No, that's okay. That's okay. This isn't that exciting, but the first money I made in e-commerce was a PayPal donation. So like I wasn't even selling stuff. I was giving stuff away for free, and somebody donated $20 to me on PayPal. So
Okay.
that's the first time
Wow.
I made any money in e-commerce. So
And
um,
how many years back was that?
11 years ago, I think. So yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah,
So
and looking at the number of apps that you guys onboard every month, I think that's the amount of money you're making every minute or every hour or whatever, right? As in far more than that, but
yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
trying to
doing,
think. I'd have
yeah,
to do the math on that, but yeah,
yeah,
it's
exactly, yeah. But I wanted to spin it very nicely because the numbers have been exponentially exponential,
yes, for
and
sure.
these 11 years have like paid in all ways possible and towards a very bright and awesome thing that you guys are doing. So guys, check out KnoCommerce. They're a wonderful platform. I've seen them, really nice, and of course, one of the leaders on the Shopify store. If you want to get your customer insights, and ping Jeremiah as well in case he can help because I know he can, and I'm sure you figured it out by now. And again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Love the conversation. But the only thing you don't get to choose is because you were nice, you will be requested to come back here in a few months' time, and you have no way to say no.
Okay, sounds good. It's been really good. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Indeed. All right. Thank you so much.
All right.